Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire supported by Glenlivet Books. After the intense focus in August and September, the world seems to have taken its eyes off Afghanistan, and yet the country faces a truly dire situation. The BBC has reported that perhaps 50% of the country is short of food, perhaps 2 million children are in danger of severe malnutrition, and earlier the United Nations said that maybe 1 million children could die this winter. So is a catastrophe staring Afghanistan in the face? And is the world at this moment averting its attention just when that attention and help is needed? Joining me now to talk about the situation in Afghanistan is the representative and country director of the World Food Programme, Mary Ellen McGroarty. Ms. McGroarty, let me start with the simple question, because the truth is, people outside Afghanistan don't realize just how dire is the situation in that country. So can you begin by telling us how grim are things in Afghanistan?
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, I mean, the situation is desperate here in Afghanistan. I mean, we have the impacts of a most severe drought in 3 decades, colliding now with the impact of an economic meltdown. And this is coming on top of like decades of conflict where you have massive displacement, economic fragility before. And the whole thing is just coming together just in an apex of despair and hunger and destitution for the people. We knew 2021 was going to be a difficult year anyway because of the drought. I mean, it's the worst drought in 3 decades. I spoke to farmers across the country who tell me they've lost their entire harvests, right? They haven't seen, for them, it is the worst in a long time, as I said, 3 decades. On top of that now, their options, because prior, their options of being able to go and find a job somewhere, the agricultural labor, the urban labor, has all been wiped out because of the economic crisis. I am meeting men and women across the country who are telling me they haven't eaten for days. They are terrified for winter because they do not know how they're going to feed or how they're going to keep their young families warm. I met a man last week when I was in Afghanistan. He says to me, I have lived through 19 governments in Afghanistan. I have never seen it as bad because just those two things coming together. And I know for people outside the country of Afghanistan, they're saying, well, what's actually happened? Well, what's happened is all the, salaries are not being paid. The economic infrastructure has collapsed because 75% of the budget is now gone. And when you pull that rug away, of course you're going to have an impact, but a massive impact. And
Let me repeat some of those astonishing statistics that the media is reporting, but which the world seems to have turned a blind eye to. Tell me if they accord with the truth as you know it. The BBC has said that 50% of the country could be seriously short of food. 2 million children could face severe malnutrition. And I believe the United Nations a couple of weeks ago said that their great fear was that 1 million children could die this winter. Do those statistics reflect the truth as you see it?
Yeah, on the latest food security assessment, which we have done along with a number of agencies, including WFP and FAO, shows that 22.8 million people, over half the population, are what we call acutely food insecure. 8.7 million of those people are one step away from famine-like conditions. What does that mean? That means that they have to resort to what we call negative coping strategies to be able to put food on the table at least once a day, and many of them cannot. Also, on the malnutrition, we are seeing the nutrition centers and the hospitals filling up with malnourished children and laying 2, 3 to a bed. Many of those are coming from the same family. You speak to the mother who is sitting there praying, looking for some sense of reprieve and some sense of hope, and she hasn't eaten either. I was in Kunduz the other day, right? I met a mother whose child had recovered from severe malnourished, but was malnourished again because they had nothing at home. And many of these are what we're calling the lucky ones because they're able to get to a nutrition center or a hospital. There are many more behind them, and these are huge numbers, but behind every single one of those is a person, is a child, is a family who today are struggling to put food on the table. Men have told me about scavenging in the bins, scavenging at the markets to try and find stale bread that they can bring home and feed their families. I was in Herat a couple of weeks ago. Men in the displaced camp surrounded me, begging for food. I asked them, well, how did you survive before? We used to be able to get jobs in the town, but there's no more work. That day, their wives were out scavenging on the rubbish heaps to find plastic and paper to sell as fuel. I mean, it's frightening when you go out and talk to the people, frightening.
In addition to the dire food situation, which in very graphic terms you have painted for us, this is also winter, and winter can be freezing in Afghanistan. Are the Afghan people prepared for temperatures that are already plunging below minus? I noticed that the forecast for today is -3. It's going to be -4 on Wednesday. It's going to be -5 on Thursday. Are the Afghan people prepared for this winter without heating, without adequate clothes? Are they prepared?
Well, this is one of their biggest fears for the parents, for many of the women and for many of the men I've met. This is one of their biggest fears. How do they keep their children themselves warm? I mean, efforts are moving to get shelter materials in, to get warm clothes in, but for the major part of the population, people who were self-sufficient before, right? You know, I mean, I was in Kandahar. The women told me that the price of, cookie or heating gas has doubled, and they have no money. Yeah, so they're terrified as to how they're going to keep themselves and their families warm. I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, you look at the one. I cannot imagine what it is to be like. You know, you're there as a parent, and your young children, you can barely feed them.
You've painted a very graphic picture, Mr. Mc Groarty, of the dire food situation, people literally in danger of starving to death. And on top of that, the freezing cold conditions, so that if they don't starve to death, they might end up freezing to death, or maybe both. Tell me, in these circumstances, what sort of aid and what sort of assistance is the World Food Programme looking for?
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, we're looking for emergency food and nutrition support. So we've been scaling up our operations at an incredible pace over the last couple of months. In November, we've managed to get food and nutrition support out to over 6 million people, and we continue to scale up. But we urgently need funding. Our calculation is that we will need $220 million a month in 2022 to try and stem off a catastrophe here in Afghanistan. In addition to, of course, the food and nutrition support that WFP is looking, I mean, you also have the other sectors. I mean, there's incredible water stress because of the drought. The farmers need seeds and inputs to be able to plant, because if they are unable to plant this year, they will have no food for next year, and many more will join the queues. The medical support is also required, but then also at the same time, we need some innovative solutions for the economic situation. The economy is the lifeblood and oxygen of a country. So we really need the economy resuscitated. If that doesn't happen, we're going to have millions more joining the lines for humanitarian assistance.
Can I ask you this? You said that you need $220 million per month. Is that simply to take care of the dire food situation? And are the medical support, the farming support, the water stress separate and additional? Or does $220 million cover everything per month?
No, it's $220 million a month for food and nutrition support only. We're trying to reach 23 million people. It is only $110 per person for the year. That's the cost of keeping people alive. $110 per person per year to get emergency food out to those that are right on the brink at the moment.
Tell me something. Given your requirement, what sort of response have you got from the world internationally?
Well, for the initial appeal back in September, we were looked for 200 million to get us to the end of the year, to the end of 2021. I have to acknowledge the incredible generosity of donors who have stepped up. So we've been able to get that funding, which has allowed us to scale up our assistance coming into the end of 2021. We are in discussions now for 2022, but I don't have anything confirmed yet. I mean, it requires a massive lift in terms of what support is required for 2022.
So just to clarify, you've got the money and support you need up till the end of 2021, which means
yes,
it will last for roughly another 24 days. But starting
yes,
the new year 2022, you've got no commitments of support as yet.
yeah, I mean, I have a couple of discussions that are ongoing, and we're nearly close to finalizing. I think about 195 million, but I mean that's not enough even for 1 month. Huh?
Okay, in these circumstances, how disappointing is it that an offer from India of 50,000 tons of wheat made in October is still stuck and hasn't reached you? I'm not going into the politics, but the problem is politics is holding it up and it's been held up for 2 months, and yet there's dire need of it. So how disappointing is it from your point of view that you have an offer and politics is holding it coming to the Afghan people just when they need it?
Yeah, I don't know the background on that offer, Karan. I mean, I think that's a bilateral contribution, so I don't have any visibility on that. I mean, all I would say is we need all the support. I mean, the Afghan people really need all the support that can come their way at the moment. I mean, this is their hour of greatest need. I mean, and as I've heard from many of them, they've never seen it so bad. Huh?
Now, at the recent conference held by the United Nations some 4 or 5 weeks ago in Geneva, 600 million was pledged. Have those pledges materialized into actual money? Or is it one thing to make a pledge and another to deliver? And is there a gap and a lag in between? And are you suffering from that gap and lag?
Well, in respect of the World Food Programme, we have received what we requested. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, they've very quickly come forward. And so we've been able to scale up in response to getting the funding. So, I mean, I have to really commend the generosity of the donors who quickly stepped up for the World Food Programme and gave us the 200 million we were looking for.
Now tell me, when you get the food you need, how is it distributed? Do you do it yourself, or do you rely upon other institutions and charities functioning in Afghanistan?
Yeah, I mean, what we do is when we get the food in, we get some food locally, we bring food into the country. We work with an amazing network of NGOs, both local and international. We also work very closely with the communities that we serve, so we distribute through those channels. So basically, it's completely under the ownership of WFP, and then we work with the NGO partners, our area offices. I mean, we have an incredible bunch of national staff as well, over 470 national staff across the country that are also working for WFP. So that network, and we have over 600 distribution points across the country.
So the distribution is entirely under the control and supervision of the World Food Programme. You may involve NGOs, but you supervise it yourself all the way through.
Yeah.
Do you at all work with the Taliban government, or is that a problem for you?
I engage with I have to engage with the authorities. I mean, it's because, I mean, as a humanitarian agency, we discuss with all parties so that we can reach those most vulnerable. When I have been out in the provinces, I have been talking to the provincial authorities. Again, it's very much about securing that unimpeded humanitarian access. It's about reiterating the independence, the operational independence of what we do, and that's independent assessments, independent verifications, the impartiality and the neutrality of what we do, so that our targeting criteria and everything else remains objective and independent, and we target the most vulnerable. What I'm finding is in mostly as I go out is that they want the international community to realize the extent of the problem, and want the international support, and want us working in the areas reaching the most vulnerable.
I understand the prime need, the critical need of the World Food Programme maintaining its independence, its separateness, and the fact that it is not in any way political. But does the Taliban government cooperate? Do they help you?
Well, what they do is they basically stand back, and what I'm finding is they are standing back and let us do our work. If I do have an issue or we have a problem, they move to help resolve it. You mean, because again, it is not homogenous throughout the country, and you will have some, maybe trucks that are stopped somewhere or something like that, and they've been, once we make that call and make it very clear and very robust, the principles on how we operate as a humanitarian agency, they are, I'm getting, what would I say, the facilitation to be able to do what we need to do at this dire time for Afghanistan.
My last question, Ms. Mc Groarty, and I was going to say, look down the road 6 months, but maybe 6 months is too far. Look down the road the next 3 months to say March. How do you see the situation? And secondly, what are you most worried about?
Oh gosh, I really, really hope, and we're doing everything we possibly can to stem back the tsunami of hunger and malnutrition that is sweeping across Afghanistan. We do not want those images of starving children to be the defining images of Afghanistan. And, I sincerely hope and ask and plead with the international community for their solidarity and their support in terms of the resources that we need over the next couple of months to be able to get the people of Afghanistan across the worst of the winter. We are going to be we are now racing against time. Because the hunger has set in, the winter has set in. So we're racing against time, but we're still, there is still hope, and we need to keep alive that hope, and that hope needs to be translated into support by the international community so that we can get out there and get food assistance and nutrition assistance delivered to the critical areas. Otherwise, I just, Karen, I just don't want to think about what it would look like if we cannot do that. And if we cannot scale up not only WFP, but the entire humanitarian sector, if we cannot get that scale, that massive scale that we need. And I see it already. I see the positive glimmers already when we're able to get food assistance out and nutrition assistance out to the communities, because we have been scaling up. And we need that trajectory to continue. Because, as in the absence of the economic solutions, which also, there has to be some economic solutions as well to put the oxygen back in the economy. We need to really be pushing hard on the humanitarian effort, because otherwise I am terrified for this country if we cannot do that, and terrified for its people, terrified for the children who are the future of this country, the next generation, and really what they are facing into at the moment is unbearable.
I heard that very, very eloquent plea. It's summed up by that phrase, I'm terrified for this country. And I think the audience will hear it as well. I hope the passion that you have brought to this interview will evoke the response Afghanistan needs. I thank you, Ms. Mc Groarty, for speaking to me and for being so fulsome in explaining the problem you face, as well as the solution that the world must respond to.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I come from it, as a human being also. And it is very hard to watch the suffering that I'm witnessing at the moment. It is very hard, but that's what we will do, and we will do everything possible to try. But we need the international support.
I thank you for this interview, and I want to thank you for the wonderful work you're doing and wish you the best of luck. Take care.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and thank you for keeping a focus on Afghanistan. I think it is important. It is very important at the moment that the international community understands the plight of the people of Afghanistan.
Thank you.